Sometimes evil doesn't come in the dark. It comes in the morning, with the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of someone trying not to be disturbed. Outside, the mist was still thick, but Silas Ward had returned from the southern pasture, his red, dusty boots tapping slowly on the old wooden porch. The wind blew down the valley from the bitter ridge, carrying the scent of sage and damp cow manure. Everything was peaceful, like any other morning on the farm he had built 15 years ago. But then he looked out the kitchen window, and time stood still. Walked as if each step were a punishment. The girl, 20, silent as a fallen leaf, struggled to keep her balance, one hand clutching the edge of the table, the other clutching her skirt. Her right leg dragged, the knee as stiff as rotten wood. Her face was pale, but she forced a smile at the creak of the door hinges. Silas was not a curious man, but he knew, as he knew the cracks in the ceiling, as he knew how to read the sky and predict storms, that she was hiding something dark. And when he caught her eye just before she turned away, there was something in it that sent a chill down his spine. Not afraid of you, but afraid of someone else. And if his hunch was correct, then someone in human form had set foot on his farm with dirty intentions. Silas Ward tightened his grip on his hat. He made a big mistake. Fiberglass in the familiar creaking door, Silas entered, the sound of the hinges a dry greeting. Mercy started, turning away quickly, trying to hide the pain on her face. But Silas had seen it all. Her face was pale, and for a moment he caught a glimpse of fear in her eyes, a fear that was not for him, but fear all the same. She returned to the stove, stirring the pot of coffee, her movements too careful, too controlled. "Good morning, Mr. Ward. Coffee is almost ready." Her voice had a strained artificial quality to it, the kind only heard in wounded animals trying to convince the world that they were okay when they clearly weren't. Silas hung his hat on the hook, silently observing her back. Her shoulders hunched, her hands shaking slightly as she reached for the cups. They all told a story she wasn't ready to share. Silas Ward spent his life reading the signs of nature, the weather, the behavior of animals, the subtle language of the land. Now, he knew something was serious, and whatever is happening to Mercy Whitmore, it's getting worse. The question is whether she was injured by accident or whether someone intentionally harmed her. If it's the latter, Silas will have to decide what kind of person he is. He took the cup of coffee from Mercy's shaking hands, his fingers brushing hers. Her skin was cold despite the warmth from the kitchen. He felt her flinch, not from surprise, but from the reaction of someone expecting pain. He took a sip of coffee, looking at her over the rim of the cup. She turned her back, busy with unnecessary things, wiping the already clean table over and over again. A frantic activity, trying to disappear without actually leaving the room. "Mercy," he called softly. She stiffened, her hand wiping the towel over the same spot for the third time. "Yes, sir." "You're hurt," he said, not a question. They both knew it. The silence stretched between them like a held breath. Outside, the nightingale's song echoed, cheerful and carefree in the morning air. In the kitchen, there was only the soft ticking of the clock and Mercy's uneven breathing. When she turned back, Silas saw something that made his jaw clench. Her lip was split on the left side. A fresh wound, a yellowish-purple bruise spread across her cheekbone, mostly hidden by her hair pulled deliberately forward. But it was her eyes that told him all he needed to know. They contained the weary resignation of someone who has stopped believing in a better tomorrow. "I fell," she said, the words coming out too quickly. "So clumsy. Tripped down the stairs last night." Silas put down his coffee cup carefully. "I've heard enough lies in my life to recognize them." This lie fell into the void between them, as empty as an empty grain silo. "Show me that staircase," he said. Brian's face turned pale. "Sir, she fell down the stairs. I want to see it." She opened her mouth and closed it again. They both knew that there were no stairs in her small cabin behind the main house. It was built on flat ground with only one step. Silas built that cabin himself, like everything else on his land. He knows every inch of land, pleasantly hung like smoke from a dying fire, bitter and obvious. Mercy's hand twisted in her apron. For a moment, Silas thought she would tell the truth. Instead, she straightened her shoulders, raising her chin with a defiance that would have been admirable if it weren't so heartbreaking. "I should get back to work," she said. Silas watched her turn away, noticing the way she moved with the careful steps of someone who knew exactly which movements would bring pain. Whatever happened, this isn't the first time. The way she acted, the way she hid her wounds, was the behavior of someone who had learned to survive by keeping quiet and hiding. But as Mercy limped toward the storage room, Silas Ward made a decision that would change everything. He will find out who is harming his employees. And when he finds out, he will know what it's like to come up against someone who has spent his life believing that protecting what's yours isn't just a responsibility, but a sacred duty. The only question now is whether the truth is worse than what he was prepared to deal with. To afternoon, Silas did something he had never done before. He watched his own land as if a stranger were lurking around. He stood near the stables, where he could see the road from town to Mercy's cabin, pretending to fix a broken bridle while his eyes followed every movement. The sun was beginning to set when he saw a knight approaching. Even from a distance, Silas recognized Deputy Vernon Briggs's slovenly appearance and arrogant demeanor. He rode as if he owned every inch of ground his hooves touched, his badge glinting in the evening light. Silas never liked Briggs. This deputy has a cruelty that runs as deep as a dry well, and a look in his eyes that makes people feel like they owe him something just for existing. He was the kind of man who preferred power to justice, and everyone in town knew it. But knowing about it and doing something about it are two completely different things. Briggs dismounted near Mercy's cabin, tying his horse to the stakes Silas had installed for the guest. But this is not an official visit. The deputy glanced around nervously, making sure no one was watching, before knocking on Mercy's cabin door with the back of his hand, so hard that Silas could hear it 50 yards away. The door opened almost had been waiting. From his position, Silas couldn't hear the words clearly, but he could read the body language. Briggs pushed inside without invitation, and Mercy backed away, looking submissive and frightened. The door closed, and Silas felt his hands clench into fists. Every instinct told him to rush in and settle things the way his father had, with his fists and principles. But something held him back. Perhaps it was the realization that confronting a deputy might make things worse for Mercy. Or maybe you need to understand what you're dealing with before you act. 20 minutes passed, 20 long minutes, during which Silas walked until the ground was worn down, his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. When the last cabin door opened, Briggs stepped out first, adjusting his gun with the satisfaction of a man who had achieved what he wanted. Mercy appeared behind him, and even from a distance, Silas could see she was standing differently, more carefully, more in pain. Briggs mounted his horse and rode back to town without looking back, whistling a tune as an insult. Mercy stood in the doorway for a long moment, one hand gripping the doorframe as if she needed it to steady herself. Then she stepped inside and closed the door. Silas stood there in the twilight, the pieces of a terrible puzzle slowly falling together. A deputy with too much power and not enough conscience. A young woman with nowhere to go and no one to protect her. And now he knew why Mercy was limping. The question is, what are you going to do about it? The next morning, the sky was dark and heavy, clouds hovering low over the valley like a woolen blanket. Silas lay awake all night, his mind whirling with possibilities and plans. By the time dawn broke, he had made his decision. He found Mercy in the kitchen, moving more carefully than the day before. She didn't dare look him in the eye as she served breakfast, and he noticed she had pulled her hair back to cover the fresh bruises on her neck. The sight made something cold and hard settle in his chest. "Mercy," he said, his voice soft but firm, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." He stiffened, the coffee pot halfway to his cup. "Deputy Briggs, he was here, wasn't he?" The vase trembled in her hands. Silas thought she would drop it. As she set it down on the table, her movements were jerky and uncertain. "I don't understand what you're saying," she whispered. "I saw him yesterday. I saw him come to your cabin, and I saw the look on your face when he left." Silas kept his tone calm, but inside he was fighting a rage that could burn him down. "How long has this been going on?" Umbled like ice on a warming pond. Her shoulders began to shake, and when she looked at him, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You don't understand," she said, her voice choking. "He's a deputy, Who would believe me? Who would care what happens to someone like me? The words poured out like a broken dam. She told of coming to town 3 months ago, fleeing troubles in the East, about how Briggs had noticed her on the first day, cornering her in the back of the store with promises that turned into threats, about how he made it clear that she belonged to him, whether she wanted it or not. He said if I told anyone, he would make sure I disappeared, she whispered. He said there are coal mines in these mountains where no one will find me. He said he did it. Something inside Silas became very still and very cold. He knew Vernon Briggs was a bully and a coward, but this was something else entirely. This is cruelty, plain and simple. "Why don't you leave town?" he asked. Mercy smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Where to get the money? Where will I go?" He made sure everyone knew I was protected. "Nobody hires me. Nobody helps me. You are the only one who gives me a job." Silas stood up slowly, his hands flat on the table. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to fill the entire kitchen. "He won't hurt you anymore." "Mr. Ward, no," Mercy cried. "He will kill you, or he will have the sheriff arrest you for something that is not true. These people, they protect each other." But Silas was already heading for the door, his mind clearer than it had been since this whole mess began. He stopped, his hand on the doorframe, and looked back at her. "There's one thing you should know about me, Mercy," he said. "I'm not much of a talker, but I'm always good at making sure the right thing gets done." Mercy staring after him with fear and something that could have been hope fighting in her eyes. The road to town will take an hour. That was enough time for him to decide how to deal with Deputy Vernon Briggs. And one way or another, this will end today. Dar Falls lies in a dusty valley between two hills. Its main street is lined with buildings that have seen better days. Silas walked down the street with the steady air of a man who had accepted what he had to do. Everyone noticed him. Silas Ward only comes to town when there is important business. Pleasantly, right where he expected him, leaning against a pillar outside the tavern, his badge gleaming in the weak morning light. He was talking loud enough for half the street to hear about some unfortunate person he had chased out of town. Briggs is the kind of man who needs an audience for his brutality. Silas stopped about 10 feet away and waited. It took Briggs a moment to recognize him. As Briggs did so, something changed in his face. Maybe it was the way Silas stood, or maybe it was something in his eyes. But Briggs straightened up, and his hand reached for the gun. "Well, well, if it isn't the hermit breeder," Briggs said, loud enough for the gathered crowd to hear. "What brings you to town, Ward? Finally settling in? Talk to you about Mercy Whitmore." Those words fell into the morning air like stones into still water. Briggs's face went through many expressions. Surprise, calculation, then a slow, ugly smile. "I don't know who you're talking about," Briggs said, but his eyes had turned cold and empty. "I think you know." Silas stepped closer. "I think you know her very well." Team. The crowd began to grow, drawn by the tension between the two men. Edie Silas could feel their eyes, could hear the whispers beginning. "Edie Silas. Good. I want a witness to this. Edie Silas. It's something to say to me, Ward?" Briggs growled, his hand openly resting on the butt of his gun. "Edie Silas. Edie Silas. Edie Silas. Edie Silas. It's better to say it straight out. Edie Silas. 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 A.D. Silas, 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 A.D. Silas. Talus reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Yes, actually there is. The piece of paper was blank, just something he had grabbed from his desk before leaving. But Briggs didn't know that. And the way the deputy's eyes were fixed on it told Silas all he needed to know about the man's guilt. You see, the thing about secrets, Silas said, slowly unfolding the piece of paper, they have a way of coming to light when you least expect it. Gun. The gun swung up very quickly, but Silas moved. 15 years of farming have given him reflexes as quick as a mountain cat, and he had been waiting for this moment since he stepped foot in town. He lunged left as Briggs pulled the trigger, the bullet whizzing past his ear, hitting the wooden post behind him. The crowd scattered like frightened birds, but Silas rolled and charged. Briggs was trying to cock a second shot when Silas's shoulder slammed into his stomach, sending them both into the tavern wall with such force that the windows rattled. They struggled with the gun bar. Briggs cursed and spat, trying to point the gun bar. But Silas had spent his life wrestling cattle and hauling wood, and his hands were as hard as iron from years of honest work. He twisted Briggs' wrist until the deputy cried out and dropped his weapon bar. The gun skidded across the wooden planks and stopped near the boots of Sheriff Kane, who had run over when he heard the gunshot bar. Pulthin Briggs, with silver hair and calm eyes that had seen too much to be easily fooled. "Enough!" Kane shouted, his gun also drawn but pointed at the ground. "Turn! Both of you step back." Silas let go of Briggs and raised his hands, breathing heavily. The deputy leaned against the wall, clutching his wrist and staring with pure hatred. "He attacked me," Briggs growled. "Turn! Trying to kill me. Get him." Ikenseum was looking out at the scattered crowd, reading their faces. These are the people who have lived in fear of Vernon Briggs for too long. And now something has changed. Finally, someone stood up. "True?" Kane asked the townspeople. "This man attacked Deputy Briggs for no reason?" An awkward silence fell over the street. Then slowly, an elderly woman stepped forward, Mrs. Henderson, the landlady. "Sheriff," she said, her voice trembling but firm, "I think there are things you need to know about your deputy." "Don't listen to her," Briggs shouted. "She's crazy. They're all crazy." But more voices have joined in. The blacksmith spoke out about Briggs threatening his daughter when she refused his advances. A merchant told of the money that disappeared from his counter after Briggs ransacked the store. A series of stories, each painting a picture of a man who used his badge as a weapon against the very people he was supposed to protect. Sheriff Kane's face darkened with each revelation. When the last of the people fell silent, he looked at Briggs with disgust. "Vernon," he said softly, "I think you'd better tell me about Mercy Whitmore." "I crimson and don't." Kane's voice cut through Briggs's protest like a knife. "Don't lie to me anymore." Silas stepped forward, keeping his hands visible. "Sheriff, there is a young woman working on my farm who has been terrorized by your deputy for months. She has bruises that tell a story no decent man wants to hear." Kane looked at Silas for a long time. Everyone in the area knew Ward's reputation. A man keeps his word and minds his own business. If you speak up, it means something serious. "These are serious allegations," Kane said. "They are lies," Briggs shouted, his voice breaking with despair. "You can't trust these people any more than a sworn officer." That's when Silas pulled out the real evidence he had been keeping. The torn piece of cloth he found near Mercy's cabin. The piece of cloth matched the shirt Briggs was wearing. He picked it up this morning when Briggs was in the cabin. "Now, hold it up for everyone to see." Sheriff Kane looked at the cloth, then at Briggs's shirt, then back at Silas. As he spoke, his voice was heavy with the burden of justice long delayed. "Vernon Briggs, you are under arrest." The heavy iron handcuffs locked behind Vernon Briggs with a dry click that echoed down Main Street like a final verdict. The former deputy sat on the narrow bunk in his cell, head buried in his hands, finally realizing that his reign of terror was over. Marshal Kane, with the stern expression of a man who had seen too much, inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The clang of metal against metal was deafening, like a dark chapter in Cedar Falls was being closed. He hung the key carefully on a hook behind his desk, where everyone could see it, a silent promise that the door would never open to Briggs again.
"I'll need you to take Miss Whitmore to town tomorrow,"
Kane said to Silas as they stood outside the jail.
"She'll need to give an official statement."
Slutted, Silas nodded, his eyes steady.
"She will be there."
"Ambiguous?" Kane's voice grew deeper.
"Thank you. I should have seen what was happening. Should have stopped it sooner." "We all should,"
Silas replied, his voice non-judgmental.
"but it has stopped now."
The drive back to the farm gave Silas time to think about what was next. Mercy would need time to heal, to believe she was truly safe. But for the first time in months, she would be able to sleep without fear. It was a victory, without gunfire or cheers, but a victory all the more meaningful. He found her sitting on the porch of the cabin, looking up at the mountains as if she were seeing them for the first time. When she heard his horse approaching, she stood slowly, her face full of questions she was afraid to ask. "It is done," Silas said simply as he dismounted. "Briggs is in prison. He will not bother you or anyone else again." Mercy's legs gave way and she sank to the porch steps. For a moment, Silas thought she might pass out, but then tears came. Not the silent, desperate tears he had seen before, but tears that washed away months of pain and fear. "I can't believe it," she whispered, her voice choked. I thought he would always." "Clang, you thought wrong," Silas said softly. "Sometimes it takes just one person to stand up and say, 'Enough is enough.'" They sat in comfortable silence, the sun beginning to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in gold and crimson. The farm felt different now, a peace it had not felt since Mercy had arrived. The shadow that had hung over them had finally lifted. "What happens now?" Mercy asked, her eyes still on the horizon. Tace thought about the question. "Now you will heal. Now you will remember what it feels like to be safe. And if you want to stay here, there is always work for someone willing to do honest work. What if people ask what happened?" Silas smiled, a rare smile. "Let them ask. The truth has a way of spreading faster than a lie once it gets started." As the stars began to appear in the dark sky, Mercy Whitmore smiled for the first time in months. It was a small smile, shy and fragile, but it was genuine. And for Silas Ward, who had never been fond of grand gestures or flowery words, it was worth every risk he had taken. Sometimes the most important battles are not the ones fought with guns or armies, but the simple courage to stand up when standing up matters most. And sometimes when a quiet herder finally decides to speak up, his voice can shake the very foundations of justice. The truth set them both free, and in the dim light of evening, a new chapter, free of fear, began. And the evening sun slowly descended over the valley. The silence that prevailed was not only the silence of nature, but also the rare peace in the soul of a man. Silas Ward, a man who had spent his life living among the majestic fields and mountains, found peace standing next to a girl who had been deeply hurt. It was not the victory of a gunman or a legendary duel, but the victory of courage, determination, and above all, kindness. Mercy Whitmore, who once limped in fear, could now watch the sunset without hiding her wounds. Tears finally came, not from pain but from relief. She had believed that fear would be her constant companion, but Silas had proven her wrong. By standing up, he not only protected her, but also rekindled hope in a community that had lived in submission for too long. The key hanging on the wall of the sheriff's office is more than just a piece of furniture. It is a symbol of justice served. It is a reminder to everyone in Cedar Falls that even when power is abused, there are still those willing to stand up for what is right. And for Silas, accustomed to the solitude of life, he has found a new connection, a new meaning to his life. He is not just a rancher, but a protector, a support for the weak. Their story doesn't end here. This is just the beginning of a new journey where Mercy will learn to trust and Silas will continue to stand up for what he believes is right. It's a story of healing, of hope, and how sometimes a small act of courage can change the world.